Good evening, friends. Thank you for joining us on this discussion on Bonded Manufacturing Warehouse Scheme. The scheme proposes to promote Make in India and ease of doing business in India. And we feel it's come at a right time for us to discuss amidst the recent announcement by Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi about being a self-reliant and self-dependent India. I would like to thank Gracelyn Lita and Chartered Accountant Akash Kumar for immensely helping me in putting this presentation together. Some of the legends that we've used in the presentation, you may want to just look at it so that we'll understand the context and the circumstance in which it's used. Moving on, we'll quickly discuss the agenda for today's presentation. Initially, we'll discuss about what are the existing schemes under the customs and probably what is their uncertainty that the new scheme has to be deliberated upon. What is the concept of warehousing and what exactly is bonded manufacturing warehouse scheme means. We'll further move on to deliberate some of the procedural regulations that's provided for. Further, we'll discuss the advantages and disadvantages of the scheme. And we'll move on to compare the same with the other existing scheme to discuss the way forward. If we take the Customs Act in its present form, we see that as per the international trade practice, the Foreign Trade Policy and the Customs Act provides for various schemes under which the tax incidence of import duty on any goods or service that is proposed to be exported doesn't arise. Now, which of these schemes is applicable to each business depends on various factors, that is the nature of goods, the sector in which the business is operating, and so on and so forth. So if you see the existing schemes under this background, there's the duty drawback scheme, there's special economic zone, there's advance authorization scheme, there's this EPCG scheme, export promotion on capital goods scheme, duty-free import scheme, and warehousing. So what is the uncertainty in this background arises a pertinent discussion here is recently in the late 2019, the WTO has served India with a notice to withdraw the benefits that is given to export-oriented units, SEZ, and the incentives thereon. The reason why WTO's panel had served this notice is the United States had moved WTO challenging the initiatives of India to these schemes, saying that it is harming its companies by creating an uneven playing field. Now, this whole notice that is served on India mandated that we withdraw the benefits to these export-oriented units, SEZs, and so on within 120 days. However, India has appealed to this ruling on the ground that they erred in making this ruling. But as we stand now, there doesn't seem to be a clarity on what's the way forward because WTO hasn't ruled anything in favor or against India. So we understand that the future of these schemes, incentives in the form of EOU, SEZ, EPCG, does seem a little uncertain to businesses. So that gives a room for these businesses to deliberate on what are the other options that the government is willing to give. Now, if you take, in this context is where this bonded manufacturing warehouse scheme calls for relevance. If you take the warehousing as a concept, we all know the importance and relevance of logistics and warehousing in the global supply chain. It is indispensable for the transportation of goods. We all know that. Especially in the context where the e-commerce is boomed and various concepts like just-in-delivery, waste minimization, and inventory management has cropped up. However, it's not a new concept like we already discussed. It is a statutory facility that is already available under the Customs Act for depositing imported goods in the designated warehouse with a deferred payment of import duty. Now, what is the existing type of warehouse that's available under the Customs Act? We have the public warehouse, private warehouse, and special warehouse. Chapter 9 of the Customs Customs Act deals with the provisions of these. Public warehouse, of course, needless to say, as the name suggests, it's a undertaking that belongs to the state or the central government that's licensed by the designated officer, that is the principal commissioner or commissioner of customs. This is basically notified under the Major Ports Trust Act. If we take the private warehouse as a option, it is a license that's awarded to the applicant by the principal commissioner or commissioner of customs, as the case may be under Section 58, where the dutiable goods are imported either by the warehouser himself or on behalf of him. There's also a provision for special warehouse. Of course, it is meant only for specific goods that are notified for that purpose. We are not going in detail about these. We will focus only on the discussion with respect to the private warehouse. So under Section 65 in the Chapter 9 of the Customs Act, on October 1st, 2019, the board notified a regulation coming up with this hybrid concept of bonded manufacturing warehouse. Now, what does it is it something new that wasn't already contained in the Customs Act? The answer is no. Of course, Section 65 already contained provisions relating to permitting, manufacturing and operating activities in a warehouse. But what does this new regulation propose to do? If we try to understand, there are very many benefits that it proposes to give to the licensee. So we will deliberate on each one in the coming slides. So a custom bonded warehouse is a licensed private warehouse where manufacturing or other operating activities such as labeling or packaging will be permitted with a deferred payment of duties on the import of raw materials and capital goods. This scheme will benefit the manufacturers, global online retailers. How it benefits, we will see in our forthcoming slides. So in order to move on, we need to understand who will be eligible, whether only a business that is setting up the warehouse newly will be eligible. The answer is they will also be eligible. And the advantage is an existing private warehouse will also be eligible for this benefit. So this is also provided for in the regulation. We'll just get a quick bird's eye view of the benefits here in this slide. If you see, any private bonded manufacturing facility, they may import raw material and capital goods from abroad with a deferred duty payment on the basic customs and the IGST. They may also procure raw material and capital goods from the domestic area, DTA, but however, the GST tax incidence shall be complied with. It is not exempt. Now, with the help of these raw materials and capital goods, the facility will manufacture the finished goods, and such finished goods might either be exported with an exemption of the deferred duty. So when the licensee proposes to export, the tax incidence that was deferred gets exempted. However, the option is available for the licensee to also clear to the domestic tariff area. This is where the scheme is absolutely beneficial, because in most of the schemes, there is either no availability of this option to clear to the domestic area, tariff area, or there is very many conditions imposed in clearing to the domestic tariff area, or it might not even make financial sense to clear to the domestic tariff area. So when the licensee proposes to clear the goods to the domestic tariff area for local consumption, that is when the tax incidence of customs duty that was deferred becomes payable. Now, what are the conditions under which it is payable? We will just come to it soon. So a quick overview on the benefits. Yes, from just a brief of it, it is going to strengthen the Make in India campaign. It is facilitating ease of doing business. It is definitely promoting India as a manufacturing hub globally. And it is intended to promote the foreign direct investments. Yeah, quick wrap up on the benefits. The raw materials and capital goods when imported, the duties such as customs duty, surcharge, and IGST payable gets deferred. If these inputs are utilized for the exports, the deferred duty is exempt, as we saw earlier. Only the finished goods that are cleared for the domestic market, that is when the deferred duty becomes payable on both the raw materials and the capital goods. So the other advantage of this scheme is that it provides for absolute modernized approach. It gives a very clear and transparent procedure in black and white about how it is simplified. There is no ambiguity or ifs and buts in the compliance and procedure. It is promoting digitalized account keeping. Now that traders and businesses are used to GST compliance, this is going to be a breezer. Believe me, we did go through the regulation, and it did seem a little easier than what the other schemes propose. The circular that also came up with the regulation has cleared ambiguity on various operational aspects of the regulation, also to the extent that they don't conflict with the schemes that are presently in force. CBIC is proactively collaborating with Invest India department. They have launched a dedicated website. It is state-of-the-art website. They are very proactive, and they have all the information that we will be looking for. One of the most attractive features of this scheme is the prior permission of the officer for clearance of goods, for the removal of goods or clearance of goods, has been done away with, because it is completely documented, and the provisions, regulations provide for a watertight documentation. They only mandate intimation and acknowledgement, and no prior permission is required. We feel for businesses, this saves a lot of time and hassle in operating. Just to give a quick brief on how to obtain the license, you could either be an existing private warehouse, bonded warehouse, or you could be someone who proposes to establish it newly. Both options are possible. You can convert your Section 58 license into a Section 65 license, or you can file a dual application under Section 65 for the same. However, Section 58 license is mandatory here. Online application with annexures there, you just have to fill in the required details and attach the documents. There is a mandate on executing a triple duty bond as per Annexure C of the regulation, and the same has to be submitted to the respective officer. The respective officer will grant license. However, he will be visiting the facility physically and evaluate the premises before licensing the same. It is also very important to note that this license is a lifetime license unless the licensee wishes to cancel or suspend the same, or the board suspends it for any violations thereof. This, again, we're just trying to explain how the deferred duty operates here in terms of raw material, in terms of capital good, and in terms of finished goods. It is very interesting to see that the government is proactive in coming up with schemes that benefits the businesses with something that is not contained in the existing scheme. This we say primarily because of the flexibility that the bonded manufacturing premise offers in clearing the manufactured goods to the domestic tariff area. Those who have been in the export business will appreciate the hassle and the tedious procedure to be followed in case they are operating out of SEZ or EUU, for how difficult it is to clear to the DTA. Here, the procedure is very simple, and there is no export mandate that is required. However, the only catch here is we see the regulation provides for an interest to be levied. Now, this is interesting to note. So, there is a point at which the licensee decides to either export or clear it to the domestic tariff area. So, the moment when the licensee decides to clear to the domestic tariff area, interest on the duty that was deferred becomes leviable if the period exceeds 90 days. So this gives room for a good business planning to mitigate the cost. So we will quickly touch upon what are the procedural aspects in terms of filing and compliance. Like in any other scheme, the licensee has to give an undertaking to maintain accounts as per the regulation. Of course, we discussed about the triple duty bond that needs to be executed. Further, it is very interesting to note about the input-output norm here. So we'll quickly discuss a little bit in detail about it. So businesses who have been operating under the Advanced Authorization Scheme or SEZ will be very familiar with this term SION rules, the standard input and output norms. While customs duty always mandates, if you see in the way it is functioned, it mandates the standard procedure in which the input and output are documented and accounted for by any business. While it is so simple as it sounds, when it is implemented in real terms, there is a lot of ambiguity and there is a lot of procedural aspects in implementing the same. In fact, that is the major disadvantage of the existing schemes where there is very strict SION rules or input-output norms. If we take the new scheme, it's very interesting to note that the licensee or the company that is taking license under this scheme can determine their own input-output norm and submit the same to the designated officer. So that gives a lot of room for genuine businesses to operate in a very hassle-free and lesser compliant environment. Of course, we have the mandatory requirement of appointing a warehouse keeper. He should be experienced in the customs procedure and rules, and he should also have a digital signature, which is not surprising because all the procedural compliance are electronic filing. If you take with respect to the facilities, equipment, and personnel, yes, they mandate signages across the premises. They only encourage computerized system of accounting. They would like to ensure that sufficient control is put in place and securing the storage of goods. There are conditions for transportation of goods, but it is significantly easier than other schemes. They only mandate a one-time lock, sealed with one-time lock for transporting the goods from the customs station to the warehouse, and from the warehouse when there is an inter-warehouse transfer, that is from one warehouse to another, or when the final goods are ready for export from the warehouse to again the customs station. Moving on, some of the other procedures are, of course, the transfer of goods, like we said, has to be along with the due intimation to the bond officer. Like we said, there is no prior permission that is required. The removal, again, it only calls for the documentation of filing of bill of exchange when the goods are cleared for home consumption, and mandates the payment of import duty with interest, as we discussed, when the time limit exceeds 90 days, and any penalties thereof in respect of those goods that were warehoused. Further, when you're removing the goods for export, again, the documentation, like in any other export, you file the shipping bill, bill of export. Of course, here the mandate for affixing one-time lock is provided for. There's an interesting provision here that the warehouse, when it is licensed, has to be provided for as a principal or additional place of business for the purposes of GST. It's not surprising because they are giving the leverage to operate in the domestic tariff area. Treatment of waste management is also very interesting in the scheme if we see. So the waste that is generated during the manufacturing of the resultant product when the imported raw materials are used can be cleared only on the payment of duties that were deferred. However, if the company or the licensee decides to destroy the waste that's generated, the duty remission rules are applicable. You can apply for a duty remission there. Moving on, with respect to what are the compliances of intimating the officers that arises, yes, at every point the goods move, there is a mandate of intimating the designated officer. and the time limit prescribed is uniformly 1 month. So it's just a thumb rule. You keep 1 month from the time of movement of goods. It could be from the time of import and moving of goods to the warehouse. 1 month from there on, acknowledgement has to be filed. Between after the finished goods are ready for export, the movement of goods from the warehouse to the port, again 1 month time frame. Within a month, the acknowledgement has to be filed with the designated officer. Again, when it is removed for the domestic tariff area, the same rule applies. Within 1 month, the acknowledgement has to be filed. Some of the requirements of maintenance of record, this calls for a lot of importance. As I said, they have ensured that the maintenance of records shall be watertight so that there is minimal manual intervention. This is not surprising because they would like to keep the entire procedure computerized. So you can see the maintenance of records of removal, movement, handling, storage, even drawal of samples from the warehouse, everything has to be documented, and the prescribed forms and the format are provided for in the regulation. With respect to preservation of physical and digital records, they do mandate a minimum of 5 years of keeping up the records, and they also mandate having digital copies at another alternative place apart from the warehouse, of course, to prevent the loss from natural calamities. There are monthly returns that is mandated, and they are mandated within 10 days of the closing of previous month. Having seen the whole procedural aspects and the benefits that the scheme has to offer, it's now time for us to understand, so what are the advantages, if there are any, in the scheme? Yeah, so like we always mention, it's a single point approval. Unlike SEZ, EOU, or STPI, where you have various departments from which approval is required, that's not the case here. It's a single point approval here from the commissioner, and they've made the form of application also easy by making it a single effort than a dual effort for applying both under 58 and 65, section 58 and section 65, for those who propose to give a new application. Definitely, the cost of compliance is reduced. There is no prescribed application fee. It is very interesting to note that there is no bar on period of warehousing. For the businesses, those who have operated under the existing private warehousing, they will be aware of the time limit that is allowable to warehouse goods. So, like for example, in case of capital goods, it's 5 years. And beyond that, if you need extension, you will have to approach the commissioner. Whereas no such prescription of time limit is provided for here, which is definitely comes to the rescue of businesses. Further, like we already discussed, there is no prescribed value addition norms. I would say the most complicated SION rules with respect to input-output or any value addition that is mandated in other schemes, no such norms is provided for. This comes as a great boon to the licensees. Further, it's very interesting to see that there is no geographical restriction. For all those who have been in this space, they know the private warehouses can be only in designated industrial area, whereas this bonded manufacturing facility can be in any area. In fact, they go to the extent of making it flexible for converting your existing premise into a bonded manufacturing warehouse. Of course, we just saw how the compliance is very easy. It's single format, everything is digital. There is seamless warehouse to warehouse transfer without payment of duty. Not many procedural lags there. Not many officer intervention there. That makes it really quick in time. There is no fixed export obligation. This again comes as a great boon to businesses, especially for those who are trying to explore export opportunities. While every other scheme has some sort of a export obligation, it could be in terms of the export order with actual user, or in terms of export exceeding import, there is no such obligation that the regulation provides for. This is again a biggest advantage under the scheme. There are the other benefits that are available are also available in the scheme cohesively. So this is very interesting because there may be instances where they have to be used in conjunctively. So we feel that this scheme has made it possible by providing for. As we already discussed about waste and destroyed goods, there is duty remission available when you are destroying the waste, and only in case it is not destroyed, the duty is payable. Yeah, so when we deliberated this regulation in its whole holistic perspective, we did see these could be some of the hitches or glitches in being part of the scheme. The digital maintenance of records, while primarily we say this because this is new, so the existing ERP system has to be tweaked to this to provide for this. But definitely with the experience of implementing GST in businesses, this should be a breezer. It's just a question of taking a little time in tweaking your ERP system. Definitely the annexure is a little elaborative, so we will have to spend some time on maintaining it digitally. The one disadvantage majorly we felt to keep it on a footing to be an alternative to SEZ or EOU or other schemes is it only provides for manufacturing and related operation. Service operation has not been provided for. So this doesn't come as a surprise because the chapter deals with only goods. So we will see if the government has something to provide for the services if the WTO issue rakes up seriously. So disadvantages to the domestic market, yes, they have specifically provided for in the provision of regulation with no ambiguity that any raw material or capital good procured from the domestic market has to be GST compliant. So there is no room for deeming it to be a deemed export. So that's another disadvantage we felt. Since we are putting it on this footing with SEZ EOU, we felt there is no income tax benefit that is available. So that could be a disadvantage. Of course, so the audit also is a point that has to be taken seriously because it is mostly self-declaration and digital maintenance of records. It is open to risk audit. So since it's based on risk criteria, they have to be prepared for any surprise visits. So having deliberated in detail about the scheme, we thought we will touch upon some of the aspects of comparing the bonded warehouse scheme with the existing scheme. We've just taken about 8 or 9 parameters on which we would like to compare, and that is relevant here. So here we are comparing the advance authorization, special economic zones, export promotion on capital goods, export-oriented units, and bonded warehouse. So concept-wise, we know advance authorization is a license that you get on pre-import basis, and you get it with an actual user condition. It does come with export obligation. SEZ, we all know, is a designated duty-free area where manufacturing or service is carried out. EPCG, again, enables an importer to import capital goods at zero rate of customs. Export-oriented unit is very similar to SEZ, where the operations are allowed. We just discussed about the bonded warehouse, where import goods that in the nature of raw materials or capital goods are stored with duty deferred until they are cleared for export or domestic market. Well, with respect to the need for license, yes, under the existing scheme, advance authorization, yes, you need a license to import. That is mandatory. Under SEZ, no, you don't need a special license to import. Of course, SEZ as a license is tedious to obtain. EPCG, yes, you need a special license to import. That is the same with export-oriented unit. However, we saw that bonded warehouse only requires licensing of the warehouse and no license to import. There is a validity of license in other schemes, unlike bonded warehouse. Advance authorization is available only for 12 months, so it has to be renewed with the completion after the tenure is over. Of course, we know SEZ is limited period 5 years or 10 years, as the case may be. EPCG again is 2 years. EOU again is 5 years. Like we saw, it is a great advantage. Bonded warehouse doesn't come with any expiry term. Adherence to SION, we did see it is SION norms are mandatory in advance authorization. SEZ has its own rules, not maybe in the nature of SION norms. Again, EPCG has its own rules. Export-oriented unit is also required to follow SION norms. The norms in a bonded warehouse shall be defined by the company. So that gives it an advantage over other schemes. Eligibility criteria, yes, advance authorization is only available for specific products, specific goods under the foreign trade policy. With respect to SEZ, we know there is a minimum threshold of the land area that's required. Normally it's 50 hectares. EPCG, as the name suggests, is restricted only to the capital goods with an export obligation. Export-oriented unit also mandates a minimum threshold of investment. However, in bonded warehouse, any existing or a new facility can be converted into a bonded premise. Again, just on the point of export obligation, there is a value addition that is required to fulfill the export obligation. With respect to SEZ, the net foreign earning is very important within a time frame. Same is the case with EOU, and the export value also being 6 times the duty saved is mandatory in EPCG. Thankfully, no such obligation is provided for in warehouse. Another interesting point is value on which import duty is payable when the goods are cleared. Here, it doesn't apply to the advance authorization, primarily because you are not allowed to clear it to the domestic area. In SEZ, we all know when it decides to clear it to the DTA, the value of goods sold from SEZ to DTA includes the value addition in SEZ. So that does increase the tax incidence of which in turn increases the cost of the business. EPCG, that's not available because we are talking about capital goods here. For EOU to clear the goods to domestic tariff area, specific permission is required. However, in bonded warehouse, when the business or the license decides to clear the goods into the domestic tariff area, the import value of inputs used for domestic clearance is only the component. The value addition does not form part of the component in determining the duty payable. This is another biggest advantage when you keep SEZ and bonded warehouse on a level footing. Moving on, we will quickly see in this background, probably what are the businesses or what kind of activities will probably be more benefited from considering moving to the new scheme, the bonded manufacturing warehouse scheme. We felt the businesses that are exploring opportunities in export, so those who already do not have any export order, will benefit immensely from obtaining a license as a bonded warehouse, because that gives them time to explore the international market, especially in trying times like COVID. And definitely manufacturers who are heavily dependent on imported raw materials and capital goods, the working capital is definitely saved. The working capital is available for other expenditure where the duty is deferred. Definitely e-com and other companies who are primarily into packing, labeling, repacking, definitely this scheme is out there to benefit them in all terms of deferring the duty, and eventually when they export, not having any duty thereon. the existing SEZs and EOU under the uncertain environment which we discussed initially, with WTO behind India to withdraw the benefit, especially being backed by the US, we really need to be cautious. Companies availing advance authorization or EPCG, definitely the scheme comes as a great alternative because of just the availability of an option to clear the goods to the domestic tariff area, which is otherwise not available in either of the scheme. So manufacturers who are also deliberating in these trying times to move out of other countries to shift their manufacturing activity to India for various reasons. We all know the world is looking for options, and definitely India is on the top of it for manufacturing. This scheme couldn't have come at a better time than now for encouraging such manufacturers to come into India. So we would like to conclude this session by saying the bonded manufacturing scheme is a great boost to business model who's heavily dependent on imported inputs. Existing business premises can be converted, which is a great advantage. When planned properly with a great business strategy, it optimizes the capacity utilization to the best, both in terms of planning your export orders and domestic orders. The streamlined bonded scheme will definitely motivate and attract new investors, especially in situations like COVID, and put India in the global market at a different level. Uncertainty on the existing schemes with the WTO's mandate definitely gives an advantage of the scheme being implemented by businesses. With this, I would like to conclude the discussion. We'll move on to the Q&A. Thankfully, we already have one. Yes, Mr. Johnson. Well, you're talking about the existing private manufacturing warehouse, which is in force parallelly with this scheme. So this scheme will apply to only the warehousing that is licensed under the regulation. This regulation of 2090, the MOOWR, does not apply to Section 58 and vice versa. The 2016 regulations do not apply to 2019 regulation. That's why if you see, the regulation is in fact termed as number 2. I hope that answers. Yes, it is possible, and the GST can be claimed as credit. So any instance of GST that forms part of export is available as input credit. Okay, that's a very good question. The factors would definitely be the cost arbitrage, if I may call it, in considering how ready is the premise for conversion into a bonded warehouse. Number 2, what is the proportion of their export order vis-a-vis the domestic tariff area? Number 3, could also be some kind of a business strategy where the company is able to adopt and implement clearance of final goods to the domestic tariff within 90 days. Definitely after 90 days, the interest is going to be a component and businesses won't be happy about it. So some of the factors we feel would be relevant are these. Maybe there could be more. Okay, you're saying Schedule 3, which states that supply of warehouse goods before clearance would be treated as supply. Yes, even here it is treated as supply and it is subject to GST. There is no exemption from GST that is available. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your patient listening. I would like to thank Gracelyn and Akash once again. Thank you. Have a great day.